Namaste, you're on The Nation at 5. I'm Anand Narsaman coming to you live from the newsroom here at CNN News 18. Ladies and gentlemen, just the other day, last week, we celebrated the 87th birthday of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But Europe has seen a huge round of protests. Protests by Tibetans who have converged towards Paris after the killing of a Tibetan national by 3 Chinese nationals. This is the big story that we start with, where we're getting you the exclusive details and the pictures. It's a show of strength against the Chinese regime, which happened in France with Tibetan activists and Tibetan nationals, families coming together in this entire show of strength and protesting the murder of a Tibetan national by 3 Chinese nationals. Protests were held in Paris over the death of activist Tsultrim Tsang. Tsang was killed by 3 Chinese nationals in Normandy on the 11th of July. The 3 Chinese nationals are currently in French police custody. The protesters have alleged Tibetan diaspora are being deliberately targeted by the CCP, and strikes in parts of France over murder of Tsultrim Tsang. These are the details that are coming through, and this is happening. This murder happened on the 11th of July. On the 14th, His Holiness the Dalai Lama drew a clear line between the Chinese people and the Chinese establishment, that is the CCP-PLA. He very clearly said that the Chinese people understand Tibetan culture and they're also wanting to learn about Tibetan Buddhism and the ways of the Tibetan people. He said that he's not a splittist. What he's asking for is autonomy and preserving Tibetan culture, clearly alluding that the PLA-CCP were working towards doing away or erasing Tibetan culture and Tibetan people. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama spoke in Jammu just 3 days after this act had happened in Normandy in France. You can see the pictures that have come in, and these pictures very clearly show the number of people who came out in support. They actually, our investigations editor Manoj Gupta getting us these details, that people came from multiple parts of Tibet, multiple parts of Europe to try and come out and express support and question and protest this brutal murder, and also underline the fact that they will not tolerate this kind of atrocities perpetrated on Tibetan people by the CCP. And this is, we will try and go across. We'll try and go across to our guest this evening. We have Thupten Gyatso. He's a member of the Tibetan Parliament in exile. He's joining us from France. Mr. Gyatso, namaste. Thank you for speaking with us. Namaste. Can you take us through what happened and what is the demand that the Tibetans are making right now? How come there was such a huge outpouring and show of support?
As you have well introduced the sad story of a Tibetan national who has been killed in his working place by the Chinese nationals, and a Chinese restaurant last Monday, 11th of July. And it is really, really sad because the reason for which they had a small controversy, overall controversy of being a quarter of light on the job of work. So there's no huge, any big valid reason to kill somebody. And nothing can justify by taking away a life of a Tibetan national in France, especially from Chinese origins. So that is really sad, and Tibetan people are really at the same time getting angry, and both sadness is there. So whole community is under the shock. And yesterday, the 17th of July, in the French capital, we had a white walk which drawed around 10,000 Tibetans come together to say to the Chinese that it will be, we hope anyway, it will be first and last murder from China and France, because Tibetans who came to France were seeking a place of security, a place for freedom after having been oppressed in their country, which is under Chinese illegal occupation. So that is why we are so sad, because our Tibetans who are supposed to be safe and free and just having lead a normal life, but he is prevented from doing that. So that is the story, yes.
But Mr. Gyatso, there is also another problem. The CCP and the PLA seem to be systematically weaning off young Tibetan youth in Tibet away from Tibetan culture. Because is it true that many Tibetans who are fleeing or coming from Tibet into Europe, they don't even speak the Tibetan language? They don't understand Tibetan culture, and hence they are forced to work in Chinese restaurants because that's what they've been taught, Mandarin and the CCP way.
Yeah. Certainly, some of them, they are brainwashed by the communism, and they don't have Tibetan cultural value, Tibetan heritage, because there is no any space to be educated in the Tibetan culture and mainstream in Tibet. Because under Chinese colonialist Sinization program, there is no any space for Tibetan to enjoy their culture and their values. So that is why those Tibetans who recently arrived in Europe, especially in France, at the beginning they don't speak French, so they used to have some basic knowledge of the Chinese Mandarin. Then by facility they are going jobs for just they get it. So that is how it is began their life. And another hot issue right now is the Chinese government policy is from the kids at the age of the between age of the 4 and 8, they are just open boarding colonial schools. They try to uproot the Tibetan new generation from their language, from their culture, and separate them from their family. That is a huge endangering Tibetan national identity.
But Mr. Gyatso, do you agree with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who on the 14th of July made a difference, drew a difference, very clear line between the Chinese people and the Chinese government or the Chinese authorities? He called the Chinese authorities hardliners, and he said the Chinese people are with the Tibetans. They understand Tibetan culture, and there is a respect for Tibetan Buddhism among the Chinese people.
It is absolutely. I wholly support and underline His Holiness vision, because there are a few hundred millions of Chinese common citizens who appreciate, who demonstrate their faith towards Tibetan Buddhism, especially, and they place their faith in His Holiness Dalai Lama. And we have to make differences between Chinese citizens and Chinese government Communist Party, whose hardline doctrine influenced the Tibetan policy, Chinese policy on Tibet. So that is why always we need to separate from Chinese culture, Chinese people, and Chinese party dictatorship who try to Sinizate Tibet and Uyghur and Mongolian. And they are kind of intolerance, and they try to just to promote their dictatorship against basic right, basic interest of Tibetan people, Uyghurs, Mongolians, and even the Chinese citizens who seek for basic freedom of expression. They have been arrested, tortured, and till death,